Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this afternoon, we are going to look at a very interesting topic. And that topic is, is Jamaica snubbing Korea, and that South Korea and Japan, is the US taking over our energy sector? That is the question because we have just recently swapped one ambassador, US ambassador, Jamaica's ambassador to the US for another. And now we have Antony Anderson, retired police commissioner, and he is now occupying the seats there in Washington, D.C. Now, yesterday, when I woke up and I saw the Gleaner's article, my topic was affirmed. It says here, Trump eyes energy, tourism in Jamaica, US president sees opportunities for expanded trade, increased investment in island. And this was published in the Daily Gleaner that was published yesterday. United States President Donald Trump has hailed the relationship between his country and Jamaica while pointing to the potential for expanded trade between the two nations as well as more US investment in the island. Trump was speaking during a ceremony in the Oval Office at the White House on Thursday, where Major General retired Antony Anderson, Jamaica's new ambassador to the US, presented his letters of credence. The presentation ceremony marked the completion of the credentialing process, the most significant part of the formality that affirms the diplomatic role and reinforces the strong bilateral ties between Jamaica and the US. In his remarks, Trump indicated that the arrival of Jamaica's top diplomat is important on many levels and signifies the close partnership built on a foundation of deep ties between our people. And I quote, this is what Donald Trump is saying. It signifies more than 60 years of friendship between our nations and our enduring commitment to trade, investment, and security, Trump emphasized. He expressed strong support for the government and people of Jamaica and for the continued development of what he considered the special relationship that exists between the two countries. Trump said, the US government looks forward to working with the government of Jamaica on mutual goals of countering transnational crime and strengthening regional security, particularly through the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, that's the CBSI, and through collaboration on Haiti. So we know that security is going to be a big issue, but so is energy. Highlighting the importance of improving the prosperity of both nations, Trump reiterated the shared interest in trade and investment. This is what Trump is saying, and I quote, we see opportunities to work together on expanding trade and promoting more US investment into Jamaica, particularly in areas such as energy and tourism, the president highlighted. So already we're seeing that there is going to be a lot of investments in energy and security. These are very two important areas in which this ambassador is going to be seeking this bilateral relationships with or bilateral relations between the US and Jamaica. Now, I did a lot of research and I understand that climate change also is on the agenda. And you'd be surprised a lot of things which are on the agenda with Jamaican people are not really aware of, as we do not have the media houses there trying to inform us as to what is going to happen in Jamaica. But the current ambassador that's retired, what's his name, Antony Anderson, did sit down with Forbes, and Forbes News is a US publication. And this was published on June 25, 2025. And the title of the article was Forbes magazine. Jamaica's Ambassador Antony Anderson on strengthening US ties, economic growth, and the future of the island. That was the title of the article. And this new appointment, referring to the ambassador, which Anderson has had for nearly 3 weeks, represents a marked departure from his former role as the Commissioner of Police of the Jamaica Constabulary Force. In this new chapter, he faced a complex geopolitical landscape, one shaped by a Trump administration focused on challenging foreign trade norms and implementing a zero-tolerance immigration policy that spurred the mass deportation of more than 2,500 Jamaican nationals. Now, this is what I think Anderson is saying. Anderson, a warm yet reserved figure, sporting a pale blue suit with a red tie and the Jamaican flag proudly pinned to his lapel, said leadership and focus are essential now more than ever. Jamaicans are not constrained by how they see themselves in the world, said Anthony Anderson, that's 61. So he's quite, not very young, but relatively young. He's not yet a senior citizen. We come from a small island in the Caribbean, but we don't think that way. We have no problem taking first, second, and third at the Olympics in a race. So that was what he was sharing with his interviewer from the Forbes newspaper. In his first major interview with an American publication since his appointment, Anderson shared his vision for Jamaica's relationship with the United States. He also discussed the recently revised U.S. travel advisory for Jamaica, his plans to strengthen Jamaica's diplomatic footprint in Washington, and how he intends to address the challenges posed by the current political climate, striking a balance between his ambassadorial role and the growing influence of Jamaican American diaspora. We're looking out for new opportunities, and there's no better time for opportunity than change, said Anderson. My work will focus on helping Jamaica navigate these changes to create better and larger opportunities that align with our policy of growth. And now the fact is, I think all countries have that policy of growth. Are we having great growth? No, I don't think that our economic growth has been great over the years since the Andrew Holness-led administration has been in power. So that is what he is suggesting here, that he's there to bring growth and investment to the island. And Anderson is looking to, harness investments in energy and also in security. No? Anderson, whose previous role as head of the police put him in direct oversight of public safety, quickly highlighted Jamaica's falling crime rates, which he said reaffirms the island's safety for American tourists. So when you look at real crime numbers and the incidences of crimes against tourists, American tourists are absolutely safer in Jamaica than any major US city that they might choose to visit. Anderson said, but you have perception versus reality. The island has seen a 45% reduction in murders and a 20% in major crimes year to date. So this is Anderson's sort of agenda, and the fact that he is there to seek as much investment in security and also in energy. Now, my topic was affirmed because I'm wondering, now that Anderson is the current ambassador to the United States, Jamaica has now rejected a major Korean energy company, even though Korea owns nearly half of the JPS. And now Antony Anderson, or a new ambassador to the United States, is quietly moving to deepen ties with Washington on energy and security. What's going on behind closed doors? These are some of the questions we need to ask. Is the US about to take over Jamaica's energy sector, one deal at a time? In this video, we are going to try to expose the quiet shift in Jamaica's foreign policy and what it could mean for our electricity, or our electricity bill, our sovereignty, and our future. Jamaica has denied a license to a Korean. Well, it hasn't. It has decided not to extend the license that it had given to the South Korean company and also to the Japanese company, even though South Korea owns 40% of JPS. At the same time, our new ambassador to the United States, Antony Anderson, is actively building closer ties with Washington on energy and national security. Who really owns and controls Jamaica's power company? That's the JPS. Why Korea's energy bid was rejected? Well, it wasn't rejected, but it was actually they're not going to continue that license that they had previously signed, that contract that they had, what Antony Anderson is doing in the US and why it matters. The rising influence of the United States over Jamaica's energy decisions. Now, that is what we have to explore because one of the things we saw is that Trump is now re-establishing America's hegemony in the Caribbean and in Latin America. Now, before Trump came into office, we heard the spat between the United States. Well, Trump before, when after he won the election, he was suggesting that the Chinese are investing in Panama, particularly in the Panamanian Canal, and that he is going to ensure that the Chinese no longer is seeking to invest or no longer invests in the Panamanian Canal. And no sooner than he got into office than Panama ultimately declared that they will no longer be continuing their contract or their agreement, their contractual arrangement agreement with the Chinese in terms of their investments, their future investments in the Panamanian Canal, in the Panama Canal. Now, that is something that is very interesting. So we see where the United States is reinforcing its Monroe Doctrine 2.0, in the sense that they do not want any other major power, any contending power, any power that contends US or contends with US hegemony. They are seeking to take that power outside of this hemisphere. The US should be the predominant power around the world, but particularly in its backyard and where the Caribbean and Latin American countries find themselves. So this is where we are at the moment. And immediately when Daryl Vaz said that he was no longer going to continue the license with the South Korean and Japanese companies, I realized that something was amiss here, and that was after the Marco Rubio's visit with Andrew Holness. So I realized that the US wants to be the next investor in energy in Jamaica. Okay, the United States is going to be perhaps the largest, if not controlling most of our energy sector. That is for sure, and that is what Antony Anderson has been sent to Washington to do, right? He seems to be more apt, seems to be more qualified and experienced in that area. Audrey Marks would not be able to do that, so hence they sent her back to Jamaica, and she's now a member of parliament. So this is where we are in terms of what is going to happen, what is the future of our investments. Now, I was listening to Antony Anderson in a recent interview with the Jamaica Gleaner before he left Jamaica. He did a sit-down interview with the Gleaner. Now, there was an article here, news from the Opium. Government of Jamaica serves formal notice to JPS. Current license will not be renewed under existing terms, and this is coming from the Office of the Prime Minister. So we have the Government of Jamaica has formally notified the Jamaica Public Service Company, JPS, of its intention not to renew the current all-island electricity license under the existing terms upon its expiration on July 8th, 2027. Energy Minister, the Honorable Daryl Vaz, MP, made the announcement on Tuesday, July 1, 2025, underscoring the government's commitment to meaningful reform in Jamaica's electricity sector and the delivery of better outcomes for the Jamaican people. This morning, in my capacity as Energy Minister, I wrote the Jamaica Public Service Company, JPS, and gave formal notice of Jamaica's intention, or the government's intention, upon expiration of the current all-island license, not to renew under existing terms, Minister Vaz announced. The government's decision is rooted in the need to reduce Jamaica's high electricity costs, expand the use of renewables, and introduce more favorable licensing arrangements. Minister Vaz emphasized that the people of Jamaica have not been served well by the existing electricity supply arrangements. The terms under the current license have yielded electricity prices which are amongst the highest in the region. I mean, this has been ongoing for years. This has been an ongoing matter for years, and now it is during the election time and during also the ascendancy of Donald Trump to the presidency of the United States. Now, we don't know what if there's any coincidence in this sort of decision. The arrangements are deeply flawed and in need of significant reform. The government's notification to JPS is in accordance with Condition 27 of the current license, which provides for the government of Jamaica to acquire the licensed business upon expiration. So this is what we're seeing here, that the energy minister assured Jamaicans that this move will not disrupt electricity services and that the stability will be maintained throughout the transition period. Now, I wonder too, now that they have decided to discontinue the license and they will no longer be expanding it, and that is going to be expired in 2027 as Darrell Vaz is here intimating, will there be a decline in the service? Will there be a deterioration in the service that is given to Jamaica now that they know that their license will not be extended? Now, that is something that Jamaicans will have to ask the Minister Vaz, Darrell Vaz, about, whether or not they need to watch how we're going to move from here. How are we going to move forward from here in terms of will the JPS under the current agreement deliver quality service? That is something that we have to ask, but I'm not sure. What I find interesting about this interview, and I'm going to ask you to listen a little to the interview, a sit down with Antony Anderson regarding his mission, his now new role as Jamaica's ambassador to the United States. Let me see if I can share my screen here and give you a little inkling into what is happening and his emphasis on security and energy as his major portfolio as he is currently in Washington, D.C. as Jamaica's ambassador to the United States. Very interesting times we're living in, and we need to learn how to connect the dots. Things are not just happening out of thin air, right? They're happening because they're designed to happen so, and nothing is happening by just mere happenstance, okay? So please listen to this man. Quite a charming man, but there is an element of deceit, if you look and you observe quite keenly.
Thinking at least you should be re-examining what you do to make sure that what you're doing is still relevant.
Firstly, congratulations on your point.
Thank you.
What does this mean? Your role as Jamaica's ambassador to the UN and the permanent representative to the court mean to you personally and professionally?
Well, it's a new phase. I've been a public servant now for 41 years, mainly military. Then, as you know, I was the national security advisor for a while, set up that office, and moved to as commissioner of police for 6 years. And now it's another pivot. There are things that are related to both, like you do a lot of defense diplomacy as chief of defense. Lots of work with other countries and other militaries and so on. So it's not something you're totally unfamiliar with. But of course, this is a new phase. This is diplomacy as the central theme. And it's an honor to represent the country this way.
Thank you. What would you say inspired you to accept this new call to serve Jamaica on the international scene at this stage in your career?
Well, it's as I say, it's another stage, and so service is what I do. As I say, I've been a public servant. I still see myself very much as that. And I believe I can bring something to the environment. I would say a challenging environment, but certainly it's not a settled environment.
You have been in the JD, you have been in the JCF for many years. When was it that you realized that you wanted to enter this field?
Muévelo claro y recicla un 50% de descuento por 6 meses. I'm trying to get this out. You know, so while I am trying to get this off my screen, yeah, okay.
As a youngster, I knew I'd be in one of those organizations, whether it's the military or law enforcement or something like that. I knew I'd be in that since I was very young.
Did you have a family member whose footsteps you followed?
Well, my father was one of those Jamaicans who went to the UK, and then he was in the Royal Air Force for a little while, as of that service that he was giving before he left, and then after other things. But so he had that in him as well, and he was very much an adventurer, and so he kind of grew me up the same way that you seek the adventure. He was a man who was very good with his hands. He could do things, he could make things, and he had a practical sense about how to get things done. And I believe that he transmitted that to me as a very small child. He would teach me things that perhaps other kids weren't learning. And so that, we're all the sum of our experiences and our upbringing. And I guess that led me to this direction.
How long you spent in the JDF before transitioning to the JCF? And I know that you were involved in a lot of transformative projects. Talk to me about those projects that you worked on.
Okay, so I was in the JDF for 34 years, the last 6 of which was as Chief of Defense. Before that, for about 2 years prior, I was the Deputy Chief to General Saunders when he was Chief of Defense. And as Chief of Defense, I took over within probably a few months, 3 months after the May 2010 operation. So I took over the JDF, perhaps after it had done its largest operation that it had ever done.
Right.
And then
And you really wonder after the incursion after the Dudos incursion, the Tivoli Gardens incursion, that is, you really wonder if there was a secretive joint relationship of the JDF with the military. The Jamaica Defense Forces, the military, and the Jamaica Constabulary Force, which represents the police force. I really wonder if there was a secretive merger between the JDF and the JCF, something that we have to dig further into, because that is something that he is sort of insinuating is not clearly defined, but that was a time that he actually was sought after. And then, when Andrew Holness came into power in 2016, because this was on they remember now that the incursion happened under the Jamaican Labour Party. And while Andrew Holness was in power, I think at that time too, he had taken over the mantle of the party at that time. So he recruited him in 2016 when he came back as some advisor to the Minister of National Security. And then in 2017, February, they started this SOZO in terms of the joint sort of military police security arrangement in which they would have states of emergency. And states of emergency seem now to be the crime fighting tool. That is what they're suggesting. There's no other way, and they're proud of it. If you listen to the entire interview and you listen to other interviews done by Antony Anderson, they are proud of their states of emergency. and the fact that they have no other crime fighting strategy. Very serious and something that we have to think about.
With all of the things that came after that. And by the 2012 or so, 2011, discussions were coming up around, what does the JDF do? Should we merge with the police to get better outcomes on both sides? It was important that we changed how we communicated with the public. And so, following the stint as Chief of Defense in 2016, I transitioned becoming the National Security Advisor. As the National Security Advisor, I had to set up this office that is the Secretariat for the National Security Council, but also in November.
So that seems to be a new position that was instituted by the Andrew Holness-led administration, the National Security Advisor. And it seems to me that he set up an entire office unto himself, as it were. Where is the investigation out of Jamaica? And what really was his role? And there are other issues because, as he's going to be suggesting later on, that the IMF, a part of the IMF agreement was that there should be some security should be merged with our finances. I've always known, and I've said this to you, that the IMF is a part of the US military-industrial complex. It's a part of the national security state, whether you like it or not. That is the truth. Okay? However, Jamaicans are going to understand now, it's now being made clear by Ambassador Antony Anderson, that is so. And that Jamaica had to, the IMF imposed upon Jamaica security benchmarks in order to have inked out that agreement. So maybe a lot of what you're seeing now with the emphasis on security, in addition to, of course, winning the election that Andrew Holness wants to win, a third term in office, but they have also IMF benchmarks that they have to fulfill, they have to meet in order to achieve their IMF loans, their loan agreements. Fascinating indeed, right? And the climate change, all of this are very, very much enmeshed in the IMF agreement. Something that we've got to understand. It's not just about getting some money and you putting down your debt. It's control. And it's all about control of your national borders and everything that they do. All right?
2016, Jamaica signed an IMF standby agreement that had security benchmarks attached to it. So for the first time, the IMF had done something like this, where security and development were linked.
Absolutely.
And we had signed this agreement. So we had our security goals as part of what is usually just a financial government.
Los adolescentes están creando negocios con
Let me see if I can get this off. Okay. Yeah, let me see if I can stop sharing my screen so I can get this thing off the, but you are seeing, ladies and gentlemen, you are seeing where the Anthony Major is suggesting that the IMF, he's suggesting here that the IMF, for the first time in the history of the IMF, has security benchmarks that Jamaica has to fulfill in order for them to even ink out the agreement and to get the loans that they are requesting. So we're living in a new era. This is, of course, the new world order. And everything is linked, from security to energy, right? Everything to education, to science, technology, everything is interrelated. And that is what you have to understand. And all these countries are also interconnected. You have to understand that. You're thinking that is the US and it is China and it is whatever. And I'm reading a book right now on the gentleman who wrote Clinton Cash. And you would be amazed. I can't remember the name of the book that I'm reading. Can you imagine? But you'd be amazed the level of corruption, for example, in the Barack Hussein Obama's administration. The deep level of corruption, which were never unfolded and unpacked by mainstream media. Okay, so we have to look beyond what we're hearing, and don't be fooled by because somebody's working in the government. Somebody told me the other day that they have boots on the ground. Now, you don't have any boots on the ground. You have to be able to interact with what is happening in terms of reading. Nobody, because somebody's working government or somebody's work and telling you some gossips here and there, it means therefore that you are in the know of what is happening. That is not how intelligent people, look at and do their research. Yes, you can interact with somebody in the government and hear some of the gossips, because a lot of what they're going to tell you is gossips too, because they have to sign agreements in which they cannot divulge everything to you. They can't divulge the substantive issues to you. Okay, so you're not going to know much of what is happening in government. And some of the government officials, even themselves, do not understand the real agenda behind the agenda. And that is something that you have to understand. Okay, so don't be fooled by your knowing somebody in government. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. All right. Okay, let's now continue to see. I've gotten the advertisement of the thing. And that is what, I hope I'm not penalized by showing the video with advertisements. Okay, let's go now. Let me see if I can turn up the volume. Okay.
So the government needed someone to make sure that we get these benchmarks.
Mhm.
And so I left the
With the IMF.
CDS, became the National Security Advisor, and that was the first thing on my plate, to hit those security benchmarks so we would default on our agreement, and we did that. So we set up the office very quickly.
And this interviewer from the Gleaner never asked what were the benchmarks, what were these security benchmarks requested of by the IMF. What were they? He just allowed the guy to speak, because I would have had to interrupt and ask what were the benchmarks. But no, can't do that, because this is a Gleaner and they're just there to do superficial reporting. Okay.
We hit those benchmarks, and then we also were looking at the security environment as a whole, how we manage the violence that was increasing and had been increasing from 2015, 2016, and it seemed like there was no end in sight to this. And so we looked at the legislation to create the zones of special operations. And we started looking at that in February 2017. And by September of that year, we actually deployed the first team. So we went through the entire legislative cycle and got people deployed within 6-7 months, which is actually quite, it just took a lot of focus, very focused work to get that done. And that is really just a way of twinning your security work with interventions. And then people are very familiar with it now. But it had been done before. We had done it back in it was 2003.
Okay, I think I'm going to stop here. You can go online and watch this interview. I will put it in the description for you to watch if you so desire. But it's a very important interview, and he has also another one where the ZOZOs necessary, where the states of emergency necessary. Watch those videos and see what, even though the reporter is horrible, the interviewer not digging into information, and but you can ask your own questions. You won't get any response, but you can be able to make some connections in terms of what you're seeing. Because one of the things that I didn't know, and I'm just learning out now, that a part of the IMF agreement was that they had to meet certain security benchmarks. Didn't know that. That was news to me when I listened to it last night. And I just came across the thing last night. In fact, it just had what? I think maybe about, if not, I think it was just 3 point something, probably 3.4K views. You can see what Jamaicans like to watch, but yet they go and watch the gossip channels and, people shouting and talking nonsense. And even though that this interview was not very informative, but the fact of the matter is that you can look beneath the veneer and see and learn some of the things in terms of the fact that he's now suggesting that the IMF and security are also linked. National security, not economic security, national security. Crime and murder, homicide, all of these now are important ingredients in the climate. If you are going to ink out an agreement with the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Now, and he's suggesting that this is the first time that the IMF had such a benchmark. And I would like to know what were these benchmarks, but again, it doesn't seem like we will know. I did a brief, research on ChatGPT for whatever it is last night, and because we don't have a memorandum of understanding. So first of all, I asked ChatGPT to tell me, or if they have any copy on record of the memorandum of understanding with the International Monetary Fund. And it doesn't seem like it has one, or if it does, it's not willing to give that document to me. It gave me other documents in terms of documents that are public documents, it's public knowledge, you have public access to those documents. But it didn't give me that memorandum of understanding. What it did give to me, what ChatGPT did give to me, was the fact that our primary surplus is now at 6.5. It says between 2022 and 2023, Jamaica inked out a new primary surplus of 6.5. And that was, you saw that closer to the election. And I think people were telling me that lots of money is in Jamaica and all of that stuff, because it seems to me now that the government had a little bit more wiggle room. Now, the fact is, when I asked ChatGPT, now that the primary surplus is standing at 6.5% of GDP, that's what the government is, the primary surplus that is currently running, then is it possible to go back up? And it says yes. If the government overspends and exploits this, the lowering of the 6.5 and, increase the debt, it's likely that the IMF could ask it to go back to 7 or 7.5. So we have to be very careful of what the government is doing. But somehow we are not hearing much about the IMF and what is going on. All we're hearing is what they want us to hear, that the debt to GDP has gone down. Now, the ChatGPT did also say that the debt has to be lowered to more than 60% of GDP, something of the sort. So I said, no, it can't be that it has to be lower than 60% of GDP. It has to be lower to 60% of GDP. That is what they tell us. And ChatGPT did agree with that, but it says that in the current agreement, it can go below. It might go below 59% or 58% of GDP, but it is the agreement in that it should be lower to 60% of GDP. So what happens if when we get now to 60% or 9% of GDP by 2027 or 28, I believe, would they now say now we have to go down to 50%? I mean, I don't know what is happening in Jamaica, but something is not smelling right in Denmark. Something is wrong. And we are not privy to what is happening. But I just, as a foreign policy, I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but someone who follows foreign policy, someone who's knowledgeable in the area of foreign policy, I would like you to connect the dots here. And the fact that we've had this retired national security advisor, police commissioner sent to Washington, D.C. as ambassador, as the Jamaican ambassador to the United States, something is here amiss. And is he there does he have business in security and energy? Like we know that Audrey Marks, the former U.S. Jamaican ambassador to the United States, she does have businesses in Jamaica. And are their businesses profiting from their position in terms of their being in those positions? Something is not smelling right to me. I think we're running a technocracy. As I said, government run by corporations and businesses, and it's not a government that is run in the interests of the masses of citizens. And that is what we're experiencing in Jamaica. But that is what I wanted to ask you. The fact that Darrell Vaz came out and says that he will not be extending the contract with the Jamaica Public Service Company, does it mean, therefore, that now that Trump is suggesting that he's interested in investing in energy and tourism and all the things, is it that the United States is now going to invest? It's going to be the new investment company that will be investing in Jamaica Public Service Company. Do you think the electricity bill is going to go down, is going to be reduced under the new US management? What do you think? Let me know. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. Like the video so the videos can be shared with as many people as possible. And for those of you who would like to donate, remember you can donate to my PayPal account at andy.tucker _ did I say dot? Andy_Tucker_450 at hotmail.com. Thank you so much. See you in another one.